On this episode, was this flood truly about humanity's sin, or was it an emergency measure to wipe out this hybrid race?
How about the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, which we talk about all the time, right? Predated civilization as we know it. It really does draw a lot of parallels from Zecharia Sitchin and the story of the Anunnaki, right?
And if there's a semblance of truth to the Book of Enoch, why is it being suppressed?
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Tired of dragging around that clunky old grill to every tailgate or campsite? Hitchfire has your back. Literally. Their rugged hitch-mounted grills are built for adventure. Just swing it out, fire it up, and get cooking anywhere your vehicle takes you. And I've got a code to hook you up. Use SFXDOTCOM at checkout to save 10% off your entire order. Head to hitchfire.com and upgrade your outdoor game. Hitchfire, built to burn wherever you roam. Imagine for a moment a book so ancient it predates most of the Bible. A book said to be written by Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah, the man who walked with God and was taken to the heavens without ever tasting death. A book that speaks of angels who descended to earth, giants who roamed the land, and a flood sent not merely to punish mankind, but to wipe clean a corruption that threatened all of creation. For centuries, this book was hidden, cast out of biblical canon, buried in the deserts, and nearly forgotten, except by one church in Ethiopia who clung to its secrets. Why was it silenced? What truths does it contain that were too dangerous for the world to know? Within its pages are stories of forbidden knowledge, of giants born with angels and mortals, and a great deluge that swept the earth, not as myth, but as a cosmic reset. Some say it's allegory, while others say it's the lost history of humanity, a record of time when gods, or perhaps something not of this world, walked among us. But what if everything we've ever been told about our beginnings were a lie? Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you are tuning across the nation or around the world. We are your conspiracy realists, and my name is Shane Skwarek, here with my esteemed co-host, Mr. Philipps.
I didn't think last week could get any better. That was heartfelt, buddy. How you doing?
Rip roaring and ready to go, welcoming each of you to another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies.
I switched it up.
Aiming to please Mr. Phelps. Wow, look at you. I've got to flip my screen around here. He's going wine.
Switched it up, baby. I did a little wine tonight.
You know, you often break the mantra of this show because it is Cocktails and Conspiracies, and you're typically beering and conspiracies, and now whining and conspiracies.
That is true.
The fundamental fact remains: we are conspiracies, and some sort of a beverage that accompanies that. So maybe we change that. Maybe that'll actually help us with the YT here.
Yeah,
we just call it beverages and conspiracies. I mean,
I'm a
they
fan.
won't get so up their ass about it.
I don't discriminate against any kind of beverages. Whatever you would like to drink, by all means, as long as it does the trick.
As long as it does the trick. Cheers. Welcome back to another episode for each and every one of you out there. We appreciate your support. Big news broke for us over the past couple weeks here. A couple weeks ago, by the time you see this, we were officially monetized by YouTube. Hooray! A little hooray sound effect there, which means we can start earning a couple pennies a month for every time you guys watch. So now, more than ever, please like and subscribe to each and every one of our videos if you're on YouTube. Follow us if you're on Spotify as well. We appreciate the support. wherever it comes from.
We do.
No-
We do. And Vicky doesn't get paid unless you watch those ads. So watch those ads so we can pay Vicky.
Well, yeah, on those. Well, we get a cut of YouTube Premium too. You get a
Baby.
portion of the proceeds there.
Oh,
So a little bit of
baby.
everything. As we dive in tonight, we're going to talk about the Book of Enoch, which has kind of been the centerpiece for a lot of conspiracy theories, really from the get-go. And we haven't really done too much, Mr. Phillips, on weaving this into our stories, but we've sort of
No.
been on the fringe of a lot of it. You brought this up to me a couple days ago, actually, that you wanted to record this. What kind of stimulated that thought?
Well, it's one of those things where I had known about the Book of Enoch for a long time, and I kind of forgot about it, right? It's not something that's on my mind all the time, and I never did, like, a real in-depth, and I admitted, still not super duper, I'm not Wesley Huff here, okay? Research on it. But I was watching Anna Paulina Luna, our girl, on Rogan, and she discussed it, and that kind of reignited my interest in the Book of Enoch. I was like, oh shit, that's right. Like, it's a fantastic book. I gotta delve back into that, and that's kind of really what prompted that. I said, we gotta do an episode on that, big guy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you said that too, because I was going through my list of topics that I really wanted to that I really wanted to cover, whether it be in the clips and the short videos that we make that we post on all our social channels or in an actual episode. And I'll pull a lot of these things out listening to other podcasts, other shows, whether it's Jimmy Church, the Y-Files, Richard Serrett, Coast to Coast. I'll always try to just jot down things. I've been rewatching The Unexplained with William Shatner.
It's a great
which is an older
series.
Great series. There's a couple other seasons actually that came out that I just wasn't even aware about. So I jumped on board. I just started over from the beginning, and I'm jotting down notes. And so I was going through that the other day to clean it up. And I mean, I swear it was like the same day you had said that, and I saw a Book of Enoch. I'm like, man, this
funny?
would really make for a really good one. And you said it, and it seemed like a good as time as any to dive into this and check it out and see where we can go with this. So for the uninitiated, the Book of Enoch is an ancient Jewish apocryphal, that's a weird word to read, text traditionally attributed to Enoch, who is the great-grandfather of Noah. And yes, that is the same Noah from the flood stories. So already there's a nice little tie-in here for a lot of religion and a lot of the religious talks we've had. It's actually a collection of several works: 1 Enoch, 2 Enoch, and 3 Enoch, which kind of sounds like it'd be the title for like a horror film or something. If I do say so myself. And I think I've got a subtext here. He walked with God, then he was no more, for God took him, which is really the subtitles of each of those. The earliest parts were likely written around the 3rd century BC. Unlike Genesis, Enoch was given really short mention there, but these books go into a full in-depth story, really describing as a prophet, a scribe, a cosmic traveler. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is still the only church that includes it in their canon. Nearly every other Christian and Jewish tradition have excluded it. And I've got 2 more pieces of notes for you guys here. This is the problem when we do backstories. I got to do a lot of reading here. Rediscovered in the 1700s by James Bruce. He brings copies from the book from Ethiopia back to Europe. Later fragments are found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, proving its ancient origins. So the conspiracy here, and why we decided this is a really good topic for us to talk, is the rejection from our more mainstream religions, Christianity and Jewish, is why is this text deliberately being kept out of mainstream scripture? What is wrong with it? What makes it so dangerous? What makes it so controversial? And to start that discussion, Mr. Phillips, I got a question to pose to you. I don't know if maybe it's more rhetorical, but
Sure.
Maybe you can give me an answer to as you channel Enoch up in the heavens there. The whole concept of religion is really to make us believe that there is this almighty being up top, right? I mean, look at our holidays that are set up. Christ dies, he rises again, and we're repenting for our sins so that we can kind of follow in those steps when we pass away here as well. So if Enoch is now truly taken up by God, which, mind you, is now written in the Bible as a subtext in there, wouldn't his writings then carry more weight than most prophets that we've talked about through the apostles and through each of the religious scriptures.
Yeah, so you would think so, but the problem lies in you can't verify that Enoch actually wrote this. And it's widely believed amongst religious scholars and historians that that's why the book was never considered scripture by ancient Jews or ancient Christians, because you can't prove that Enoch actually wrote this, right? If you look at the writings of the Old and the New Testament, you could trace back the origins. We know who the authors were, right? They were written in Hebrew. We can trace them back. We know who the authors were. There is no Hebrew version, at least not to the best of my knowledge, of the Book of Enoch. The one complete version that we have is in the Ethiopic canon. And prior to that, to your point, where, as you mentioned earlier, there are certainly fragments of it that have been found, some going as back as early as the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I believe are in Aramaic, and there are some other versions in Greek, but there were none in Hebrew. And so I believe that's why religious scholars don't accept it or give it more weight, if you will, because I think that's a really good point, right? Like, if Enoch did actually write this, well, if he ascended into heaven without ever actually dying, I mean, that's a pretty major event, right, in regards to religion. But if you can't prove that Enoch, right, the Enoch that we're talking about here, was the author, and it's widely believed that he wasn't, that's likely why it was left out and not actually considered to be, wasn't canonized in any faith.
You came way more prepared for that than I ever expected you to be. So
thanks, buddy.
Kudos to you on that.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah. I often struggle with the argument that you can't prove something, right? I don't think we can prove a lot of things. I don't think we can prove 99.999% of the stuff in the Bible.
Agreed.
Who really wrote that, right? Like, we're being very speculative. I don't know that you can prove that, there's a guy that walks up a mountain and some God gives him some things to write down and he etches it into a stone tablets, and now all of a sudden we got a 10 Commandments, right? Like, I think there is a level of faith, and I'm using that word intentionally there when we talk about religion. As we're going to cover a little bit tonight, there's a lot of things that happen throughout the Book of Enoch that seem eerily similar to how things would play out over centuries and to a lot of different myths here. And so the question I'm going to pose to you again, Mr. Phillips, and this is definitely rhetorical, and then to our audience, is more something to kind of keep in the back of our minds here, is, was the Book of Enoch really suppressed because they can't verify who wrote it, or was it suppressed because it now contradicts the narrative that the churches want to control? And again, more rhetorical than anything else, I think, going to kind of be the undertone for what we're going to discuss here.
Yeah, that's the fun part.
Yeah, and I think it could be even looked at inversely too. Like, did it suppress information that maybe changed the narrative or contradicted the narrative, or because it revealed too much more of that narrative about angels and giants, divine judgment, things that we're not supposed to know?
And just to add on to that, not just about things, angels, demons, and we're gonna get into that, especially when we talk about the Book of the Watchers, which is arguably probably the most famous text in all of First Enoch. But later on, and I forget what section it is off the top of my head, I'll go back to my notes and take a peek. But they even kind of prophesize the coming of Jesus, right? And mind you, this was written 400 years before the time of Christ, right? This was written. The Book of Enoch is and again, it's kind of confusing because it was never accepted as scripture, but it was written, and it was the only. I don't want to say the only religious text, but it was an important religious text written in between the Old and the New Testament, right? That's where the when we're talking about the time frame of when this was written, that's when it was written. So not only does it talk about fallen angels and demons on earth and a lot of fun, spooky shit that we're going to talk about tonight, but it might have possibly even prophesized the coming of Christ, which, I don't know, if you are of the Jewish faith, let's say, and you're not on board with that, well, maybe that gives you a bit of reason to kind of suppress that a little bit. So who knows? Sure.
Well, you mentioned the Watchers, and I think that's a good place as any to start off here.
Yeah, baby.
You're really leaning into the Watchers portion of this a lot, so I want to let you kind of take the ball here. Give us some context, some understanding. Who are the Watchers?
Yeah, look, very simply put, the Watchers were fallen angels that descended to Earth, okay? And when we talk about angels, that's where it also kind of gets a little confusing too, right? And what I find super interesting about First Enoch is that actually, let's backtrack. You kind of almost have to go back to the Old Testament, right? There were a lot of kind of paranormal beings, if you want to call them that, angels, demons that were talked about in the Old Testament, but they didn't really describe them in any kind of great detail. And when you get to Enoch 1, it's almost like whoever wrote Enoch 1, whether it be Enoch or who, and granted, we know it was multiple people because we know that from the time periods, it was written before Christ and some portions of it were written after, right? So we know it was certainly more than one person. But point being, it was almost like this group of people was trying to grapple with what they were reading in the Old Testament, right? And so when we talk about angels, and again, if you guys really want to deep dive, I really highly recommend that you guys check out Wesley Huff, also, Wes Huff, whatever you want to call him. The guy makes fantastic content. I'd love to get him on here someday. Wes, if you wind up seeing this, hit me up, baby. Or you can just respond to my DMs. I already hit you up. In any event, so there were different kinds of angels, right? The angel is more of a term of what they were doing, right? It translates to messenger, so they were messengers. But there were kind of different types of angels, if you will. In any event, getting back to the Watchers were fallen angels who came down to Earth. The females, the female Homo erectus caught their eye, and long story short, they ended up mating with earthly females. Not only did they mate and then produce offspring, which were called Nephilim, which is commonly misconstrued to believe that they were giants, but Nephilim, if you look at the root word,
we're going there.
If you look at the root word, it means fallen ones, or to fall from in Hebrew. Hence the fallen ones. They were the offspring of the fallen ones. Now, it does state that they were mighty men, okay? So something about them was different. Something about them was unusual, right? These weren't just normal human beings walking around the earth. And hey, maybe some of them were very tall. But not only did they mate with and have offspring with earthly women, but they also taught them what was believed to be things that were sort of against the rules for human of those days, right? Alchemy, metallurgy, astrology, even things as simple as putting on cosmetics, just kind of corrupted man on earth, if you will. So what goes on to then happen? Well, then we have the Great Flood. Why? Because God is displeased. God is displeased that these fallen angels came down to earth, disobeyed him, mated with his beings, right, his creations, and then essentially corrupted them, right? And then eventually you have the flood that comes in and wipes out all of the Nephilim, and not just the Nephilim, but some of the fallen angels as well as whatever humans were around at that point in time. Now, I have a question for you.
Okay, good, because I was gonna stop you and going into the flood. You're jumping.
No, I'm not going into the flood.
Way ahead for me. Good.
Not going into the flood yet. We're gonna pause right here. I have a question for you. The Watchers come down from heaven. They mate with earth beings. They produce offspring. Does that sound familiar to you?
I mean, in what context?
Do you feel like you might have heard that story before in maybe a different context?
I feel like we've heard that story 100,000 times before, but I don't know specifically where you're targeting.
Think about the ancient astronaut theory.
Oh, right. So I was going to get into that a little bit. It's always aligned to, I guess, probably the Anunnaki and times. That would be the first thing that comes to mind here.
Exactly.
Let me throw this fan of my camera here.
You do that, fan baby, and I'll keep talking. Right. That's what excites me so much about the Watchers and that section of First Enoch is because, and again, it's not perfect, but it really does draw a lot of parallels from Zecharia Sitchin and the story of the Anunnaki, right? Granted, there are some differences. The Anunnaki came here and genetically altered us to essentially kind of be their slaves to mine their gold, so the story is a bit different, but it's got a very similar premise, right?
It does. It does. And I think one of the things that I really enjoy about the idea of the theory is, you look through sort of ancient history, our human civilization, and it feels like there's all of a sudden this like giant leap in our technology where you're going from cavemen or Denisovans, these early shells of what we would become today, which we covered a little bit in our Bigfoot episode, actually. And then all of a sudden, like, we're kind of a coherent society that is structuring themselves in villages and creating these massive monuments. And where would that come from? And, one of the prevailing theories that we share on this podcast is that ancient astronaut theory. There's some sort of tie-in to some other civilization, whether it's gods or an alien race, whatever you want to dub that for the sake of this conversation. But they're coming here and they're imparting us with this knowledge to then rapidly jump us forward. So I like that. I think that aligns really well to what we know about history. Which again, like begs the question for me is like, well, why would this be left out? If there is gods coming down to earth, that seems like a bigger reason for me to then buy into the fact that there's this civilization this entity that's watching over us. When you look into all like the Greek gods, the Egyptian gods, and all these stories and these myths of these gods, I mean, it aligns really well with what the Watchers are supposed to be. So again, it's just that's the question that keeps rattling through my mind is why would we hide it there? And why would divine judgment, I guess, kind of pivoting a little bit, fall not just on the angels, but on humanity itself? Were we the victims of corruption, or were we kind of like willing participants in this forbidden knowledge? I don't know, kind of, again, somewhat rhetorical questions that maybe I'm posing to you a little bit. Maybe I'm just kind of asking myself, just kind of going back in there. And probably one of the things that's made me most intrigued by the Book of Enoch, because so many things do align like that.
Right. No, I totally agree. And I think to answer your question on why the divine judgment on man, and not just these fallen angels, and I think is the fact that we had free will either way, right? And so, yes, right, these fallen angels, these watchers, right, again, according to Enoch 1, came down and ultimately corrupted mankind, but as God's creation, we still had free will, right? And again, I'm just kind of, this is me thinking about it in the moment. This isn't something that I've really thought hard about. Just in the moment, we had free will, and so, we had the ability to thwart off their corruption. I feel like I'm using that word too often, but we didn't, right? And so, good, bad, or indifferent, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? And so that's what we got. Who knows?
I want to move back towards the Nephilim. And that was something that actually came up in the comments during our Bigfoot episode. And I'll talk about why in a second. The Book of Enoch is describing the Nephilim as the offspring of the fallen angels, the Watchers. You covered that a little bit. They're the offspring of these Nephilim, of the Watchers and human women. So these beings, as described, Mr. Phillips, as much as you don't like it, were described as being massive in size. They're described as being violent, and corrupting the earth with bloodshed and destruction. Okay. Keep that filed in the back of your mind, because I'm going to come back to this. They were described as eating human food until it was gone, and then they turned on eating humans themselves, being tyrannical, cannibalistic, and utterly destructive. I already dropped the word earlier today, just a few minutes ago. I'm hoping maybe it skimmed over your head, but who does that sound like from our Bigfoot episode?
Man, you put me on the spot.
Good, because you missed what I just said a few minutes ago then.
I did then, yes.
The Denisovans.
Okay.
So when we talked about the Bigfoot episode, I proposed a theory that I really liked about how we basically had the Neanderthals and we had the Denisovans. And there were stories of the Denisovans being bigger human types. And I went back to describing the Time Machine movie when they shot out into the future, and then you've got these beings that come up from underground and they're eating people.
Yes.
And that's, that was some of the stories and some of the lore that I've read about the Denisovans, heard through other channels here. And so when hearing about the Nephilim, somebody actually commented that on our Bigfoot episode and said the Nephilim. And I think I read the comment as being two separate things. And as I started kind of refreshing myself on the research for the Book of Enoch, it kind of dawned on me that this is probably why I had written a little note down that I just completely forgot the context of within my note-taking app. I don't know that those aren't one and the same. The Nephilim do become the Denisovans. And I've never bought into the theory of giants. And so I laughed a little bit when you said, they're not giants, they're not giants. I think the concept of giants is maybe the wrong word, because when you think giants, I mean, you're thinking like really, really
You're thinking
big.
like Jack and the Beanstalk. Right.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking that.
I agree.
I'm thinking like Shaquille O'Neal is a freaking giant.
Right.
Aaron
Aaron
Judge,
Judge.
the giant.
Right.
Yeah, the Big Show is a giant. Like, these are just bigger than normal human beings. And in an era where humans were probably naturally smaller, I think it's plausible to look at somebody that's 7, 8, maybe even 9 feet at the time, supposedly tall, and say that's a giant comparatively.
Dude, 100%. If you saw a 7-foot man walking down the street, you'd go, holy fuck, that guy's giant, right? Like,
Right
those
now,
are the words that
even,
would come out of your mouth right now in 2025.
Yes.
And so, look, when I said that they weren't giants, I really just, I wanted to get my point across that Nephilim actually translates to the fallen one, right? So it's, and some, yes, might have been quote-unquote giant. And actually, you know what it makes me think of? Do you know the story of Lovelock Cave in Nevada? Very brief, relevant to the story. Lovelock Cave is a cave that was found in Nevada. It was found by miners in 1911.
I'm guessing in Lovelock.
In Lovelock, that would be correct. Lovelock, Nevada. I would assume Lovelock Cave is what it's called. In any event, miners discovered it in 1911, and long story short, they actually found remains of giant humans, 7 feet tall. I mean, jawbones that were quadruple the size of a normal man today, with long red hair. These were actual real human remains that were found, right? It's not a sci-fi movie. It wasn't mistaken for an animal. Like, look it up. Go on Google. Check out Lovelock Cave, Nevada. Take a look at the remains there, right? Like, so we actually kind of have physical proof of, if you want to call them giants, you very well would call them giants, right? Like, we kind of know that they did walk the earth. Now, granted, limited on the subject, I don't know how old those were dated. I'm not even necessarily saying that those could have potentially been Nephilim. But I do think it is interesting that we have actually found remains of ancient human that are what you kind of would consider a giant.
Sure. Yeah, I did a quick look up. 1911 is when they discovered it. Archaeologists are suggesting that they were human remains, but they were normal sized, consistent with the population, and that the giant bones was really from the newspaper. So I think it's hard to go through that. Again, we don't necessarily always agree with that. We've seen that even in Roswell, where they come out with a story and then all of a sudden they change it. So that's an interesting one. I think that's one maybe even diving into a little bit later down the line in another episode.
That might get its own episode.
Yeah, like just giants in general. But nevertheless, I think we're kind of in agreement in that regard. Just the bigger than normal sized human being, I think, is enough to lean itself to that, especially when you consider now, if you do have these ancient beings coming down, these watchers, if you will, and they're mating with humans, there should be some crossover, right? There should be something that comes out of that two different species turning into something else. We can see that on Earth right now. Like when different species mate, they don't always necessarily look, even if they're like very aligned. Like dogs are the perfect example of that. Like there's different breeds of dogs and they look dramatically different. You can get a foo-foo dog that literally fits in your hands as a toy poodle, or you can get this like monstrosity that's as big as a horse.
And they were all wolves at one point, which is a wild thought. Even that little foo-foo shit poodle was a fucking wolf at one point. And look what we did to that poor fucking majestic animal.
Philip's defending dogs once in a while. I'm a little shocked to see that there.
Hey, look, it's just not in my home, baby.
That's it, baby. So kind of diverting off that point a little bit too, one of the other things that I lend credence to, and again, this has been really, I think, the crutch of a lot of our philosophy and a lot of these ancient theories and conspiracies, is you look across different cultures, right? And the Greeks had the Titans, Mesopotamians had the tales of Gilgamesh. There's indigenous stories across across American tribes talking about these battles of giants. There's so much consistency across the board from cultures that were supposedly never speaking, right? Like they didn't have the technology to communicate with one another. And so how do they always have so many consistent stories? And again, this is a broader topic that we cover all the time, but specific to giants, they always had a term that would kind of relate itself to that. I think there's something there. I don't think it was this, again, Jack and the Beanstalk type, but I also don't think it's something to kind of brush over. I think there's probably just a bigger human, which could be the correlation to why we have humans today that can still get this like what is that, the name of that disease? Like
gigantism or something like that. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, dude, look, I have probably said it a million times on this show. People just don't generally make shit up, right? And let's just say somebody does make something up, okay? Let's say somewhere, name the ancient civilization. One human being made up a story about giants, completely fabricated it, complete bullshit, completely made it up. Well, why do we have the same story in North America with Native American tribes? And why do we have the same story in Syria and in Ethiopia, right? And so not all of those people decided to make up the exact same thing, right? So that's part of it. And then
Across the same span of time.
across the same span of time, 100%. And then if you want to get a little more philosophical, if you will, you can't make something up that doesn't exist, right? And I know that's kind of, I know that's a tricky thing to say, but close your eyes and imagine something. And I dare you to imagine something that doesn't exist. You're going to have a tough time imagining something that doesn't exist. And even if you do imagine something that doesn't exist, you're going to draw from your life experience. You're going to draw from things that you've seen, from things that you've heard. And so there's at least, at the very, very least, this seed of truth there. And so I just find it really hard to believe that you have, I mean, countless numbers of people across the ancient world that have the same and or incredibly similar stories. I don't think you could write that off very easily.
And the claims of finding these like giant bones aren't just limited to that. Would you say Loveland, Nevada, the Cave of Loveland? Is that it? Am I forgetting that right?
Lovelock Cave.
Lovelock. I mean, there's stories of that all the time, and it's why I've kind of wanted to touch on the giant story a little bit, but it's been one of those fringe ones. But there's stories all over the place, and a lot of those stories all end the same way too, with the Smithsonian getting involved, and that's a whole nother conspiracy.
They're going to get their own episode too.
Point. Yeah, especially after all the tunnels and stuff that are underneath them that seem to go directly to the White House. Whenever I was just talking to somebody, over the weekend, and they were talking about putting whiskey on the gums of a baby, right? The old wives' tale, and how it made their baby stop crying, and they were teething. And I said, I just thought it was maybe a coincidence. And he's like, I did it 3 nights in a row, and she stopped crying all 3 nights and went right to bed right after a drop of whiskey. And I had said to him, and I'm like, 1 time, coincidence. 3 times, it's not a coincidence anymore. Now it becomes a pattern, and now there's got to be something to it. And I apply that outwards to everything we look at. I'm not saying that there can't be error in that, right? Not every story is true. It's not always true to its full extent. Like you said, you can't just make something up, though, without there being a semblance of truth to it. And so I do subscribe to that a little bit. And so when we start to see that there's findings all over the place, sure, plenty of them are mistakes, but when it always ends with one person or one group, Smithsonian, it does cast some doubt. But moving on, that's diverting off the subject a little bit here. Coming back kind of right down the middle here. Nephilim, again, wiped out by the flood, supposedly returned later. That's the David and Goliath type stories is one of the last remnants in there. We kind of tackled a lot of the questions that I really had in that. Cultures around the world talking about it. Were they mythological? Were they just humans? Let's go into the flood itself. The Book of Enoch, again, for those just kind of tuning in at this point, we're live streaming this episode onto from all of them, but I see a couple people hopping into the live stream on X and YouTube here. Enoch is the great-grandfather, or the grandfather, now I forgot my context here, of Noah.
Great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
Yeah.
So there's a direct relationship here, which this goes back to what you had brought up in the very beginning, Tim, and saying that they can't prove, these religions are, I guess nobody can prove, and why the religions don't grasp onto the Book of Enoch, that this is actually written by Enoch. Sure, perhaps it's written after the fact. I don't know. It's remnants of it are found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, so I find that to be unlikely that it's completely fabricated, but let's suggest for a minute that it is. Let's suggest for a minute that it is not. How now, what is the likelihood of the coincidence that the Book of Enoch, these biblical stories, have a direct bloodline lineage to the guy that is in biblical stories that helps humanity get saved through navigating this massive flood? Again, coincidence? I don't know that I believe in them. God sees humanity corrupted by this angelic experience, these monstrous hybrids of the Watchers and human beings known as the Nephilim, and he decides to reset his creation. Enoch is now this intermediary, according to these tales here. It's appearing again. The flood story appears in every single major religion. In every culture, there is a story of a flood that happens, how many years ago?
About 12,000 years ago, as far as I'm concerned.
12,000 years ago, which also ties into one of our favorite topics that at some point, if we can't get him on here, we're just going to have to cover ourselves. And what is that topic, Mr. Phillips?
Younger Dryas.
The Younger Dryas. It's another shout out to you, Mr. Jimmy Corsetti. We are waiting for you to be on here to talk that with us. We can't keep avoiding it. Every other show we talk about ties back to that 11 to 12,000 years ago and the Younger Dryas and this great flood. This isn't a myth. There is a flood that now we can say with fairly high confidence happened. We have proof of it happening, and we have every culture on Earth saying that it happened. What do we think here, Mr. Phillips?
In regards to the flood?
I mean, just
or in regards
I
to...
I kind of threw a whole lot.
I was going to say there was a few different questions there, or what you're saying...
A few different things here. We talk about... tie it from Enoch to the flood. We see the flood. We've talked about the Younger Dryas. We see the flood everywhere in all cultures across the world. So we know that it's happened, or that at least it's been surmised to have happened. Every religion has paid attention to it here. Now you look at the Book of Enoch, the great grandfather of the guy that's central to the story,
supposedly
wrote all of these tales, right? Who has this direct line with God. And then all of a sudden Noah gets all this information to save the planet. And we have this flood that, again, according to biblical texts, are because he was pissed off at humans. Is he pissed off at humans, or is it because what the Book of Enoch says, he's pissed off at whatever the hell is happening here? And how could you have been that pissed off at humans, which at that particular time, according to mainstream archaeology and mainstream science, were effectively coming out of like the cave era, right? Like, what could we have possibly done that bad at that particular time that we aren't doing worse now that we wouldn't have gotten hit with a flood by, right?
Right.
So when you look at that, you extrapolate that out. I'm not a very religious person, but this would be the same question I would ask, a priest or whatnot. What would we have done then that would have been so bad that, as we know it, that we haven't done worse now? And what aren't we being told about that time?
Well, what if the Nephilim were really that bad, right? So let's say, okay, just for argument's sake, let's pretend that we truly believe this story. And I'm not saying that I do or I don't. I think it's a very interesting story. I think it's worth talking about. It's certainly a shitload of fun to talk about. But let's play pretend for a moment, and let's say for a fact that we know 100% some kind of being, whether it be divine or extraterrestrial, did come down, and whether they genetically engineered and or actually mated with female humans of the time, did produce an offspring called the Nephilim. Let's say that you talked about it earlier, right? They were eventually potentially cannibalistic and actually ate humans. And so if they were that horrific of a creature, maybe God said, you know what? Fuck it. I don't think God would say those words, but let's say God said, fuck it. This ain't going well. We gotta restart, right? Maybe it's as simple as that.
And that's the response I was really hoping you'd come up with. And that's really where I wanted to get. Like, was this flood truly about humanity's sin, or was it an emergency measure to wipe out this hybrid race that is threatening all of creation, right? And if it's the latter of those, then there has to be a semblance of truth to the Book of Enoch. And if there's a semblance of truth to the Book of Enoch, why is it being suppressed? Why is it erased from all cultures, with the exception of this Ethiopian church,
right,
who, by the way, is at the heart of a lot of discussions,
right,
of the Knights of Templar?
Yes.
So we're now tying in another story into this. And we know from our Knights of Templar episodes, go back and check those out on YouTube and Spotify, that these Ethiopians died by the idea that, one, they had the Templar secrets, but by this Book of Enoch. Like, they were willing to die for it. They literally sacrificed their lives for it all the time. You don't do that if you aren't fairly well certain. Now, I'm not saying that they know for sure, but you have to have some degree of conviction. And with any religion, there's always, you're never giving the keys to the kingdom, but there's some basis for it that's making you want to believe. I can't speak for everybody else, but in Christianity and growing up, they gave you something to kind of grab onto, that next level. And there are all these tales and all these stories. And even as you get older and you look into it, there's enough out there that makes you want to believe just enough. Want to, or maybe really do believe. I find it hard to believe, not to keep beating that word, that the Book of Enoch would have been so outrageous and people would still buy into it, right? Like if it was
Yeah.
complete bullshit, people would step away from it, because there's been plenty of that's happened throughout history. If the story isn't tangible in some regard, nobody's going to grab it and grasp onto it. And it seems like there's been enough weaving in and out with the Bible and enough synergy with that where they do.
Mm-hmm.
Again,
Yeah.
is that coincidence? Is it just happenstance? I don't know.
Well, I don't think it's so much that the ancient Jews and ancient Christians, right? Because at that point in time, you could have had both religions adopt this as canon, adopt it as scripture. I don't think it's so much so that they thought it was bullshit. More so, they just didn't actually see it as scripture, meaning it wasn't the word of God. It was an important piece of literature. I mean, it was even quoted by Jude in the New Testament. He does, and I don't remember off the top of my head. We could probably look it up if we really are that curious. I don't remember exactly what was quoted, but I do know that Jude in the New Testament does quote the Book of Enoch. So it was a significant and important piece of literature. It just wasn't viewed as scripture. It wasn't viewed as the word of God. Now, I'll be completely honest. Have I read First Enoch from front to back? No, I have not. So it's tough for me to give an opinion as to whether or not it should or shouldn't be considered as scripture. But it certainly was an important religious text. Now, granted, that's when I say those words, I'm talking about like a very precise definition as to why one would or wouldn't include it into either the Old or the New Testament, right? Having said that, if you look at what's in the Book of Enoch, and there's a whole shit ton more than just the Watchers, right? And we're really talking about First Enoch here, right? As you alluded to earlier, there's 3 of them, and within First Enoch, there are 5 different sections. And so, as of right now, we're really only talking about one. We kind of brushed on the second one. It's still, from a religious perspective, both in Judaism and in from the Christian faith, it's still a very powerful and important book. And I still think it does offer a lot of value to read. And so one could make the argument that it should be considered, or should have been adopted and canonized into one of the two, just for the message that it tells in general. I think it's just absolutely fascinating. Yeah, that's what I got for you on that one.
Yeah, man, it's another one of those conspiracies that, like, I wish there was an easier way
I know.
to get to the bottom of it, because there's so much to unravel here. And I think the more the story's shared, it always gets twisted around, and there's probably more things that are tied into it that are loosely tied there, and it kind of takes the myth down. Of course, with anything that ties into religion, there's suspicion that the Book of Enoch is sitting in the Vatican archives, which is just another one of those that we'll absolutely never find out about, because they've got, like, a 500-year rule or some crap like that, and some other ludicrous rules on who can actually go down there. We'll never know. I don't know, man.
I don't know either.
It's you can't help but notice that there's this one text that answers all of the questions that the official story seems to leave hanging, whether it's who the Nephilim are, which again has been, as you mentioned, has been cited, why a flood wiped the slate clean, which has of course been a crutch for all religion, how humanity first gets its hands on weapons and sorcery and cosmic knowledge. It's a missing puzzle piece that I think, if true, changes everything, and perhaps that is why we're looking at it being suppressed. And then again, just recapping, like, you look at, when you line up all the other traditions, from Titans from Greece, the red-haired giants of Lovelock Cave, you have to ask yourself, are these just all scattered myths? Are they fragments of like shared memories in humans? Maybe people were traveling and sharing stories, and it did traverse the world to some degree, because maybe they were traveling more than we really know.
I think they had to have been.
Had to have been. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think from our
We've talked
perspective,
about that a
we
lot.
think unquestionably.
100%.
Yes. And that's for our audience too. Like, if this is your first episode listening here, we firmly believe in some degree of the ancient astronaut theory or technological civilizations way back in history. But playing on the idea of this mainstream narrative, they're going to tell you that's not the case. And so that's why we ask these types of questions, is like, well, that is not the case. How do you explain all of these pieces? And we're looking at it in a silo here. How do you explain the Book of Enoch? If all that other stuff isn't true, how do you now explain these similarities across people?
And you know what they'll say, right? The answer will be, well, we have no proof that occurred. We have no proof that they were able to circumnavigate the globe in those days. I guess my argument would be there's no proof that they didn't. In fact, there were all these similarities in oral and written tradition, and not just that, in works of art as well, and as well as architecture, right? So you find very similar oral traditions, written stories, architecture, art around the entire globe during the same time span. I don't have a good enough reason to say that they didn't have the ability to do those things.
Yeah.
I don't have any good reason to say that they couldn't circumnavigate the globe during that period of time. That would be my argument for that.
It's fascinating because when you challenge a mainstream narrative, you have to prove everything to challenge that narrative, and you can't have any holes in it. When you have a mainstream narrative, there can be so many missing pieces, but we take it as fact, and you can't challenge that. I mean, we've talked about dinosaurs on here where there's no such thing as a full dinosaur. We get a bone. We get a bone and we build a whole dinosaur around a bone.
Right.
We have no idea what that dinosaur actually looks like, right? That's the exact, I mean, you couldn't have a better example, a better metaphor than that. Is like, you have one piece and you build this whole story around it, and that's the answer. But then you have all of these other aspects, and because we can't prove all of it or give an answer to all of it, it just gets dismissed. It's one of the reasons I love doing the show. One of the reasons I hate mainstream science sometimes, because they're so close-minded. But I don't know, man. It's the beauty of it, I guess. It always leaves us with more questions than answers.
I'll give you another one about it, how when the mainstream is wrong, there's no apology. And granted, we don't need an apology, but there's never it never balanced itself out. How about the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, which we talk about all the time, right? Predated civilization as we know it. I mean, it literally rewrote the history books of when we thought human civilization was achieving the types of feats that they were. That one discovery alone pushes that time period back by thousands and thousands of years. So you're fucking wrong with that one, right? So it drives me nuts how the mainstream can poo-poo all of this quote-unquote pseudo-archaeology and pseudo-history. You guys get stuff wrong all the time. Just fucking admit it, man. Just admit it.
And that's supposed to really be the crutch of science, is to get things wrong and then continue to keep questioning the things that you think you got right. That's the whole definition. Like, the Webster's definition of that is to challenge that. But
unless you're Sheldon Cooper. He doesn't get things wrong.
Love to hear what each of you guys think out there. Do you believe the Book of Enoch exists? If you do, we'd love to know where you think it is, why you think it's just kind of being ignored. And if you don't, we'd love to hear why as well. There's no right or wrong answer out there. So leave a comment on Spotify, leave it on YouTube, X, Instagram. You can find us anywhere on the internet. Just head over to cocktailsconspiracies.com. Get all of our social media feeds over there, conspiracyrealist.com as well. We'll take you to kind of our big blanket website, so you can check out some other conspiracies got on there. Again, we thank you for subscribing and being a part of this. If you have not liked and subscribed, though, or followed us, do that. It helps us out a lot, and you're seeing that materialize now with this new monetization. If this keeps up, Mr. Phillips, we've already talked about it. We're gonna have to come up with some sort of a like a special like membership tier for like our insiders and some cool stuff. Maybe some
we'll think of something, maybe,
or Q&A. Yeah, we'll do something fun.
Help pay Vicky.
You guys want to see?
Watch those ads. Help pay Vicky.
That's it, baby. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, our drinks are nearly kicked, but we'll ask you to raise your glasses to mystery. Enjoy our great music in the beginning. This is another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. So long, everybody. Is your website still stuck in 2009 or worse, built by your cousin's friend who kind of knows WordPress?
No! God, please, no!
It's time for an upgrade. At sfx.com, we specialize in custom web design, SEO, and full-service IT solutions tailored for small businesses that are ready to scale. Whether you're just starting out or reinventing your brand, the team at sfx.com brings strategy, style, and serious tech skills to every project. Visit s-fx.com today, where small businesses get big solutions.
Visit s-fx.com.